very much for tuning in. This is a dilemma pertaining to the judicial lower courts in the judicial branch telling the executive branch what to do in terms of foreign policy. That likely cannot be the case. A president has the power to negotiate with other countries. The United States and El Salvador negotiated, came to a conclusion and a deal that enforces existing immigration laws. A lower court very likely just can't stop that. I don't know if the Supreme Court would back that. Hit subscribe to this channel right now, to my super chat. Thank you. Listen to this.
The Chief Justice said it was more than two centuries. We understood that essentially impeachment was for very rare circumstances and not an appropriate response to rulings you disagree with. What's your reaction to the courts stepping in to make a statement here? They didn't make a statement when Joe Biden decided to forgive all those student loans.
Well, he didn't mention my name in the statement. I just saw it quickly. He didn't mention my name, yeah. But many people have called for his impeachment, the impeachment of this judge. I don't know who the judge is, but he's radical left. He was Obama appointed. And he actually said we shouldn't be able to take criminals, killers, murderers, horrible, the worst people, gang members, gang leaders, that we shouldn't be allowed to take them out of our country. Well, that's a presidential job. That's not for a local judge to be making that determination.
So that's the issue in a nutshell. Hit subscribe if you're new to this channel. To my super chat. I can't do this without you. Your super chat support is greatly appreciated. Diane! Hello, AJ. Greetings from Houston, Texas. Diane, thank you so very much. Greatly appreciated. To my super chat, thank you. Thank you, Diane, for watching for so long. And let's listen to a little bit about the Alien Enemies Act. And again, foreign policy. The president is tasked and has the authority, broad authority, in the Constitution to negotiate treaties, discussions, peace deals. The authorization for use of military force allowed the president under Obama and Bush to unilaterally send Americans anywhere in the world. I don't remember judges deeming that to be unconstitutional, but listen to this really quickly.
Stephen Miller joined Fake News CNN to discuss Donald Trump's decision to invoke the Wartime Alien Enemies Act to deport members of the Tren de Aragua gang and schooled the host Casey Hunt on the rule of law, Constitution, and much more. She may want to do research before she brings Stephen back next time. Take a look.
The president's designation of Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization and as an alien enemy are part of his inherent plenary authority. There is no way.
At what point in the system, Stephen,
how are you going to expel? Hold on. How are you going to expel illegal alien invaders from our country who are raping little girls, who are murdering little girls, if each and every deportation has to be adjudicated in a district court judge? That means you have no country. It means you have no sovereignty. It means you have no future.
This went on for 10 minutes. It was a beatdown. Here with more, Deputy Chief for Policy, Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller. You're laughing because you had too much fun doing it. I've known you for too long. The one thing that Greg Jarrett picked up, and I had forgotten about it, first of all, 4 presidents used the Alien Enemies Act. 4. And the U.S. Supreme Court in 1948 upheld Truman's use of this and ruled the law itself and said it was constitutional. We even have a constitutional precedent for it, which raises questions about John Roberts to me.
This is settled law, to use that common phrase, Sean. This is settled law. Alien Enemies Act has been on the books and has been upheld for over 200 years. And by the way, the fact that it's a 200-year-old law makes it stronger. This was adopted by the founding generation of our country. The people who wrote the Constitution wrote this law because they understood when America is being invaded by a hostile power, the president is at the height of his authorities to turn back that invasion. Tren de Aragua is arguably the most ruthless, violent, menacing gang, now designated as terrorists. So these are now terrorists operating in the entire Western Hemisphere, more violent and vicious even than MS-13. What this judge tried to do would have meant, if this ruling was accepted, that a single district court judge can direct the movements of every single aircraft conducting every single deportation of every single criminal and terrorist in the United States. It would collapse the entire immigration enforcement system. It would be open borders by fiat, and our nation, it would be open season on our nation from every single hostile regime and hostile foreign power on the face of the earth. That is how dangerous and lunatic this ruling is.
What part of the law did the CNN anchor not understand? I mean, I got the impression she never even read it.
How about every part, Sean?
I got the impression she didn't understand the Constitution and the power of the presidency, never mind the fact that you're right. You point out that, you know, if you actually look at the Supreme Court ruling, the High Court ruled that under this act, it precludes judicial review of a removal order. It says specifically you can't bring it to a court.
Exactly. I mean, this is arguably, of all the statutes on the books concerning national security, this law arguably is the strongest law that exists in terms of delineating presidential power. And why is that? Because it doesn't affect American citizens, Sean. It doesn't affect Americans. It only applies to foreign citizens invading our country. So the president is operating at the apex of his authority as commander-in-chief to repel that invasion, to send the invaders out of this country. This gang, Tren de Aragua, doesn't just murder people, Sean.
So again, Democrats should simply run on keeping potential members of a criminal organization in the country. They don't do that. Democrats don't believe in anything they claim to believe in. It's just a rampant it's a never-ending quest for political power. The United States Trump has every right to speak to Nayib Bukele of El Salvador at any time he wants to and negotiate any deal that he wants that doesn't need congressional approval. So he can discuss any foreign policy and negotiate any foreign policy deal or agreement with El Salvador without a judge, and without Congress, if Congress doesn't need to approve a treaty or anything else. So the executive branch has powers that the president can utilize unilaterally. This is just basic civics. Okay, President Obama ended the life of U.S. citizen. And Democrats say, well, that was a bad person. Okay. And Trump is not ending anyone's life. He's enforcing existing immigration laws and also negotiating with El Salvador. And he has every right to do that. So I don't see the way Democrats work is they're outraged. And then you point to, oh, well, here's a more egregious use of political of power. Biden unilaterally pardoned like 20 to 30 people, preemptively. And that's never happened before. There's never been ex parte Garland, the case in 1869 after ex parte Garland. There's no precedent for a 10-year pardon when there's a zero investigation or crime committed that we know of. Where is the precedent there? Even the Associated Press, I explained in one of my videos the other day, admitted it's never happened before. That's a far greater, egregious use of unilateral authority. That's more despotic than anything Trump is doing, and he has every right to negotiate with another country, in this case, El Salvador. Now, you say, well, the judge said that the Alien Enemies Act wasn't, wasn't constitutional to use in this manner. It's like, well, he's enforcing existing immigration laws. So these are immigration laws, by the way, that Democrats also back. So again, the hypocrisy. I mean, is what President Trump, and I support what President Trump is doing in aggregate, is it 100% legal? The Louisiana purchase, by the way, wasn't constitutional, if you look back. I don't believe Congress was involved in the Louisiana purchase, but anyway, if you look at if he's trying to enforce existing immigration laws, and he's working with another country to do so, I don't see how any court judge, the Supreme Court maybe, but how can a lower court judge that lacks the authority, the judge that prevented Trump from doing what he's still doing, very likely lacks the authority. What authority does this judge have to prevent a president from speaking or negotiating with El Salvador, much less returning flights back to the U.S.?
Now, surrounding President Trump's deportation of more than 260 alleged members of Tren de Aragua. There's the dramatic video that was taken by Bukele, the head of the president of El Salvador's folks, showing everybody what it looks like to be taken into one of these prisons. It is pretty intense, dramatic stuff, and probably a good deterrent to anybody who's thinking about joining one of these gangs. Let's bring in White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Stephen Miller, who was reportedly.
Again, this is a negotiation between two countries, the United States and El Salvador. Okay, it's a negotiation between two countries. This is and also Trump is enforcing existing immigration laws that Democrats back. The Democrats should simply run, instead of trying to poke fun of Trump or go after Tesla dealerships, which is exactly what wonderful morally superior liberals do. The temper tantrum, they've been getting away with serious destruction. I mean, billions in property damage in 2020, billions upon billions going on for months. They get away with serious temper tantrums that cost people's lives. Okay, 19 people lost their lives in Trump's last year in office, not over 19. When Democrats, or I should say liberal demonstrators, and I agree with why people peacefully demonstrated, but you had billions in property damage. You had the Supreme Court threatened by Chuck Schumer. You had Catholic churches infiltrated by Biden's Federal Bureau of Investigation and other law enforcement officials, according to Senator Hawley in Missouri. I mean, they get away with everything. I mean, they've been the authoritarians and totalitarians are oftentimes within the Democratic Party the same people who look in the mirror and fancy themselves the most morally superior. If the Democrats and liberals and progressives and far left didn't want this to take place, why didn't they change the laws? Trump is literally enforcing laws that exist pertaining to immigration status. Just simply say you can commit crimes and still be here. But under existing laws, you can't. So that's why the deal with El Salvador took place. Hit subscribe if you're new to my super chat. Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
Part of the orchestration of this plan, along with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. Stephen, always good to have you with us. What can you tell us about the genesis of this plan and the effort to make sure that it happened before any judge was able to turn this around?
Well, thank you, Martha. First of all, under President Trump's direction, this was one of the most successful counterterrorism operations in American history. nearly 300 alien enemy terrorists who had illegally and crucially, as the Alien Enemies Act designation makes clear, Tren de Aragua was sent here by a foreign government. And what you saw was every arm and agency of this nation's Homeland Security apparatus and national security apparatus, Homeland Security, Justice, State Department, Defense Department, working together in perfect unison to secure the homeland.
Well, let me. I want to hear a little bit. It is a fascinating program. I can only think about some of the women and children who these people were holding in different places in different states around the country, who are breathing a little bit easier today. And I would love to hear more about those operations. But let me play this first from somebody who I know is not a favorite of President Trump. This is Andrew Weissman, who's a former top Mueller prosecutor. Of course, it's not a huge surprise that he didn't like this operation. He doesn't think it's legal under the act that you just mentioned, Stephen. Watch.
We're not at war with Venezuela. We're not at war with the gang that is the subject of the executive order.
I don't know if you have to be. Congress hasn't declared war since the World War II. So I don't know if you need a declaration of war. But go on. Let's continue. Let's listen to this.
There is no invasion that is going on, and
that's according to a very liberal viewpoint. Again, like, God bless all the wonderful, amazing Venezuelan, Salvadorian, Mexican, Latinos, everyone. God bless the 99% beautiful, amazing, wonderful, awesome, hardworking, loving, beautiful people. Okay, we're not talking about hardworking, wonderful immigrant families. We're talking about people who committed crimes on U.S. soil, perhaps. Let's just say U.S. soil, or in their home countries. This is a negotiated deal with El Salvador. Why can't President Trump? He cited the Alien Enemies Act, but why did he even need to cite that? It's a negotiated deal with another country that the president has every right under the executive branch, under the Constitution, to negotiate. It's a negotiation between two heads of state, one in El Salvador, one in the United States of America, about enforcing existing immigration laws. I don't understand what the big deal is.
You also have to show that the people you're removing are actually part of that gang, even if there were an invasion or a war. And this statute may, in fact, be very unconstitutional.
So the judge has to be convinced that these.
So then it needs to go to the Supreme Court, which, by the way, would overturn. The Supreme Court consistently and routinely sides with Trump. The Supreme Court would overturn the New York conviction because the FEC and DOJ dropped the case, and a state cannot decide unilaterally on a federal crime. The Supreme Court would probably back Trump on this because the lower court lacks jurisdiction. How can a district court decide foreign policy, which is essentially what this is?
These individuals aren't real. I mean, it's a huge group, and nobody's going to miss any of these people, but they're quantifiable. So can you prove that these individuals were linked with Tren de Aragua and that Tren de Aragua is part of a Maduro operation, Stephen?
So first of all, Andrew Weissman is an absolute moron. He is a moron, and he is a fool, and he's a degenerate. Andrew Weissman has devoted his career to putting innocent Americans in jail, taking away their civil liberties. He was involved in the Mueller coup against a democratically elected President Donald J. Trump. Weissman should never be on TV anywhere. He should hang his head in eternal shame for what he's done to this country. And now he's up there shilling for people who rape and murder Americans. That's who Andrew Weissman is. I met the mother of Jocelyn Nungary, Alexis Nungary, who President Trump honored at the State of the Union, named a national wildlife refuge after her daughter. Tren de Aragua terrorists took that 12-year-old angel and they tortured her to death. They sexually assaulted her. They stripped her and they dumped her body in a river. That's who President Trump has deported from this country. Behind every single one of those terrorists was another future rape victim, another future sex trafficking victim, another future murder victim. And most importantly, every one of those people was here illegally. They have no right to be in this country for 1 second longer.
So what's Andrew Weissman's rebuttal to that? If you commit a crime and you're in the country illegally, what is the rebuttal that any Democrat or liberal or progressive has? The Democrats who they're in a perpetual state of hypocrisy. Why didn't they pass laws stating that if you commit a crime and you don't have papers, you don't have any legal right to be in the country, you can still be in the country? Democrats should simply run on that. The left doesn't put their money where their mouth is. If you believe that you can't deport somebody for committing a crime on U.S. soil, then campaign on that. Just simply say, vote Democrat. We're going to pass laws that allow undocumented immigrants to commit crimes and not be deported. There are people who literally believe that's a moral case, so run on it. But no country would want that. Venezuela, El Salvador, U.S., no country in general would want that type of law. But again, if you believe that's the case, then run on it.
They are illegal aliens, they are foreign terrorists, they are alien enemies. And the law at the heart of this issue was signed in the founding generation of this country. The same generation that wrote our Constitution. People say, oh, it's an 18th century law. You know what else is an 18th century law? The Constitution of the United States. Indeed. The Bill of Rights of the United States. The founding generation gave us this law, gave President Trump this law to repel this invasion from our country.
I mean,
and it was all detailed in the proclamation, how this gang was sent here by a foreign government and President Trump is sending them out of this country.
Well, we look.
If there's evidence that people were sent by another country and they committed crimes either in that country or in the United States of America, and Trump speaks to Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, what crime? How is that unconstitutional? Is this foreign policy? A district judge, a federal judge cannot decide foreign policy. So it's a negotiation between El Salvador and the United States of America. And let's say you remove the Alien Enemies Act, if an undocumented person commits crimes, the laws already state that they can be deported. So unless you're a Democrat and then just simply write a bill that allows for undocumented immigrants to commit crimes and still stay in the country. Again, it sounds outlandish, but that's what Democrats, like you listen to like the Daily Show, Jon Stewart, they all like try to make fun and poke fun of Trump. It's like, well, wait a second, run on these things. Don't just make fun of Trump, run on these things.
Look forward to learning more about that, because that connection is very crucial. And I think it is, there's no higher calling for any president of the United States than the national security of the country. And I think that the law tends to support that. So we look forward to watching this. You can call Weissman names and he can call you names. And that's what's great about living in America.
This is a tit for tat with Weissman. This is a tit for tat with Weissman. I will defend American lives working for President Trump, and Andrew Weissman can defend illegal alien rapists, terrorists, and predators. If that's what he wants to throw in his lot with, then good for him. I've chosen my side. Americans have chosen.
So the judge likely lacks jurisdiction. Let's listen to this.
And we kick it off with the hot topic of the hour. More than 250 suspected illegal gang members arrived in El Salvador's mega prison last night after the Trump administration invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to quickly deport them out of America. But a federal judge is blocking Trump's use of that act, ordering the flights to return to America. However, the White House says the planes were already en route when the ruling came down. The president explaining his decision. Watch.
These were bad people. That was a bad group of as I say, hombres. Well, this is a time of war because Biden allowed millions of people, many of them criminals, many of them at the highest level. They emptied jails out. Other nations emptied their jails into the United States. That's an invasion.
The White House says the administration did not refuse to comply with a court order.
So this is in El Salvador. So are Democrats saying that Trump cannot negotiate with El Salvador? What are they saying? See, the life of a liberal pundit is just be a contrarian only when it comes to Trump. So, but like, what is it that Democrats want? Simply pass a bill protecting these people. Democrats don't want to do that. Pass a bill, AOC tomorrow should write a bill saying if you're an undocumented immigrant and you committed crimes, heinous crimes, you can still stay in the country. End of story. Just run on everyone should know throughout the world, in Venezuela, El Salvador, throughout the world, Middle East, everywhere, that Democrats do not believe in anything they say. The Trump Republicans do, and you're seeing that, but Democrats do not. Even the immigration rights activists, many don't believe in what they say. And if they did, they would simply push a bill, like I said, to allow undocumented immigrants to stay in the country even if they commit heinous crimes. That's it. End of story.
It was issued after terrorist Tren de Aragua aliens had already been removed from U.S. territory. A single judge in a single city cannot direct the movements of an aircraft carrier full of foreign alien terrorists who were physically expelled from U.S. soil. Trump also thanked El Salvador and its president for accepting the prisoners. So
this is the leader of El Salvador. This is the leader of the United States of America. They have the right to negotiate. A district judge cannot tell Nayib Bukele or Donald Trump what to do. It's just not possible under the Constitution. You cannot dictate foreign policy. You cannot decide foreign policy through creative lawfare, which is Democrats until recently have been able to dictate very bizarre ideology, to implement very bizarre ideologies and, their political will and objectives through lawfare. That ain't happening anymore. They don't have the intelligence agencies. The media has zero trust by the American people. Hollywood is completely irrelevant. So what do Democrats have? Their source of funding with USAID and non-governmental organizations is drying up. So what do they have? They lack knowledge of the Constitution. I mean, there's a chance the Supreme Court would say that Trump is wrong, but not if the argument is that it's a negotiated deal between El Salvador and the United States of America. You can't dictate what the United States of America and El Salvador decide. This is foreign policy. It's in the Constitution that the United States, the executive branch, has very broad powers when it comes to foreign policy and negotiating with other countries. The president can negotiate with other countries, and he doesn't. The president can have these types of negotiated deals without Congress, without congressional approval. So, and the only way to stop the president would be to pass a law in Congress. But like I said, Democrats are hypocrites. They're not going to pass laws that allow undocumented immigrants to commit crimes and yet still stay in America. So now they're saying, oh, you can't send anyone to El Salvador because the Alien Enemies Act isn't interpreted correctly. Well, he doesn't even have to cite that law. He can cite existing immigration laws and the fact that it's a negotiated. It's a negotiation between two countries that the president has the right to negotiate.
They made an agreement in February that El Salvador would accept deportees of any nationality for a small fee. Really interesting developments here. Liz Peek, your reaction.
Well, first of all, Maria, this is just the latest incident of an activist judge confronting this administration. I think they've decided, these judges, that they're part of the resistance. And I'm really glad in this instance that the president went ahead and sanctioned this deportation of the worst criminals to El Salvador. And kudos to Marco Rubio, by the way, for arranging this agreement with El Salvador, a country, by the way, where the leader is experiencing record high approval ratings because he is cracking down on exactly these people, these gangs that have run roughshod over El Salvador for years, and also now American communities. So I don't think many Americans are going to be particularly.
So, Article 2 of the Constitution establishes the executive branch of the federal government. It's right here. Let's look at the exact text. I mean, you can look. This is Constitution annotated here. This is not the executive vesting clause in Section 1, Clause 1 provides that the federal executive power is vested in the president. Section 3. This is not the exact text. This is a description, but Article 3 further requires the president to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed. The executive branch thus consists of the authority to enforce laws and to appoint the agents charged with the duty of such enforcement. The president also has distinct authority over foreign affairs and, quote, alone has the power to speak or listen as a representative of the nation. That's what he did with El Salvador. Trump can negotiate a deal to send people who broke existing immigration laws to El Salvador. It's within the Constitution. As a general matter, the Supreme Court has recognized the Constitution vests the president not only with the authority expressly delineated, but also with certain implied authorities, such as the ability to supervise and generally to remove executive officials. There you go. And so, I mean, it's like, it's in the Constitution. Let's look at the exact, let's just continue. I'll find this right here.
Alarmed that this has come to a confrontation between the courts and President Trump. I think they'll be delighted to get rid of these horrific gang members.
I mean, the pictures are incredible. And let me just remind everybody that this is the same judge, Judge Boasberg, who sat as the presiding judge on the FISA court. The same Judge Boasberg who gave FBI lawyer Kevin Kleinsmith a slap on the wrist after he manufactured evidence used in the Carter Page FISA application that defrauded the FISA court. So, yes, you're right. It's an activist judge. This is all about resisting President Trump. But to think that you're going to resist President Trump over getting these Tren de Aragua aliens illegally in America, and you're actually going to tell the administration to get those planes to reverse course in the air to bring them back to America, Cheryl. Extraordinary.
And Caroline Leavitt made that point exactly, that judge had no jurisdiction. The federal courts don't have the jurisdiction. And you know, just to kind of pick up on what Liz was saying, I mean, some of these migrants, their crimes, Maria, let's just remind everybody of these alleged crimes. Kidnapping, sexual abuse of a child, aggravated assault, prostitution, robbery. Someone does not want to see law.
The algorithm is like, no. The algorithm, I mean, this is terrible, horrible, but it's like, you know what? The algorithm issue here is what's taking place is the people who allegedly committed crimes. The crimes were so heinous that I'm sure the algorithm isn't having a great time here. But anyway, let's continue.
I'm standing firm on his promise to get migrant gang members out of the country.
And now some Republican lawmakers are pushing to impeach the federal judge who ruled against those deportation flights to El Salvador.
Lucas Tomlinson joins us now with more. Hey, Lucas.
Good morning, Ainsley. Good morning, guys. That's right. House Republicans have introduced a measure to impeach that Obama-appointed judge who tried to bar those deportation flights of Venezuelan gang members. President Trump told our own Laura Ingraham he stands by his decision to launch those planes.
Do you have faith that the Supreme Court ultimately will rule in your favor?
I do, because the job of getting people out of our country that are murderers, that are absolutely the worst people, the drug lords, we're supposed to be getting them out or getting them brought to justice.
Would you defy a court order? Because we all know that, and that was outrageous.
I never did defy a court order.
And you wouldn't in the future?
No, you can't do that. However, we have bad judges.
Now, Attorney General Pam Bondi and her deputy write there was no violation of the court's written order since the relevant flights left U.S. airspace, and so their occupants were removed before the order issued. And the court's earlier oral statements were not independently enforceable as injunctions. Now, the Justice Department has till noon today to answer the following questions about the flights. What time did the plane take off from U.S. soil and from where? What time did it leave U.S. airspace? What time did it land in which foreign country, including if it made more than one stop? What time were individuals subject solely to the proclamation transferred out of U.S. custody? How many people were aboard solely on the basis of the proclamation? Now, Chief Justice John Roberts disagrees with impeachment, writing, for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision.
He also doesn't want the Supreme Court to be a part of all of this, which it has to. He doesn't want the Supreme Court to get the heat from the Democratic Party, almost certainly. He doesn't want the Supreme Court to do Congress's job. Democrats in Congress can simply remove all of these powers that Trump has within the executive branch by passing bills. So AOC and others should simply pass bills that state categorically an undocumented immigrant can commit crimes and not be deported. And if you don't think that a great many people on the left truly believe that, you'd be wrong. There are people who truly believe that that is a moral and just position. So campaign and run on it. If you're a Democratic politician, simply, you're not going to enforce existing immigration laws. You don't want to do that for a lot of reasons that Elon Musk talked about the other day. But if you don't want these individuals removed from the country and sent to El Salvador, then try to pass a bill in Congress. You don't have Congress now, but run on it. Simply state what you're going to do once you're able to do so in the House or Senate.
The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. Now, these questions all appear straightforward, guys, 4 times and a head count. And by the way, I have a question, guys. When's the parade for those astronauts?
Oh,
yeah,
good
exactly.
Idea. Good idea.
All right. Thanks so much, Lucas. But here's the thing. This is judge fair. This is the only 100%. Way President Trump could be stopped. The Democrats can't stop him. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how to manipulate the system, work the system. But now you have this judge who's asking a series of questions to stop the future flights. Venezuela has gone back on their word to accept their gangsters back. So El Salvador stepped up. So that's another issue. But the 261 aren't moving. I want the next 261. But it wasn't the only problem yesterday. An appeals court judge stopped the EPA from cutting $20 billion in grants. An appeals court judge stopped them from cutting the USAID program. So this is one after another.
Well, the USAID program, that was only $2 billion for work already done. Like 90% of that agency is pretty much, has been terminated by President Trump's administration. So, and then the EPA and all that, that's for grants that have already been, they say appropriated by Congress, but the way it works is Congress doesn't actually appropriate the specific funding. They just give a blank check or like a gigantic check, and then the EPA or USAID funnels the money to absurd, outlandish, very likely stupid projects. And you could go on Doge website, you could see. But Trump is actually winning. The only speed bump are these judges, and it's like, it's not really going to work. The lower court judges can't enforce anything. And the Democrats actually don't really want see, the Democratic Party doesn't really disagree with what Trump's doing. They can't run on the opposite of what Trump is doing. I try to explain this throughout this segment. If you're watching this, you think that Donald Trump is terrible and he's horrible and he's a despot. He's not. He's a wonderful president, and he's enforcing existing immigration laws. The Democratic Party is not only so weak, but it's hypocritical. They don't believe in. So, for example, they don't believe in the opposite of what Trump's doing. They don't believe in passing a law to keep gang members who committed crimes in the country. Okay, so Trump wants a wall. Democrats don't. But Democrats don't want to pass laws keeping undocumented immigrants in the country who commit crimes. They're only opposing Trump here because it looks good for them. The reality, though, is that these are existing laws, these are laws that exist. He's enforcing laws that exist. And in terms of foreign policy, which is the Constitution right here, fill vacancies here. The president should be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and the militia of the several states when called into action to service the United States. He may require the opinion writing of principal, have the power to grant, he shall have the power to make treaties, provide 2/3. Okay, so in terms of foreign policy, he has a great deal of authority because he's the commander-in-chief. So let's continue.
Them going out. Also, a judge stopped stopped the banning of transgender service members in the Pentagon. So whose agenda is it? Some Obama-appointed judge, or is it President Trump that got elected? And this is an issue.
And we're talking about certain issues where the courts don't have oversight over. When there's discretion to the State Department, when there's discretion to the president and the executive. I don't necessarily disagree with the statement from the Supreme Court Justice, the Chief Justice, but it was missing checking the judges and telling them to stay within their lane. So we'll see what happens.
Right. Well, I think, let's see, on Friday, the judge is going to meet with the Department of Justice and the 5 people who brought the lawsuit against him with the ACLU. We told you about that yesterday. That's the reason this temporary stop happened, because lawyers said, look, those 5 people shouldn't be on those flights, and they were not deported. Here's the thing. The president absolutely, because he signed that executive order, has the authority to deport the bad guys, especially, and he made it very clear, he has the authority to deport terrorist gang members. The question is whether or not those 5 people that the lawsuit was all about are actually TDA. And apparently the lawyers have told the Department of Justice that they were not gang members. They were targeted by TDA when they were in Venezuela. And in a filing by the Department of Justice, records show that several did not have records in the United States. And apparently others were simply arrested near raids. So the question is whether.
So that's a big concern. That is a concern. Okay, so there could be innocent people that are caught up in this. Okay, that's a concern. And that's something that needs to be, I think it needs to be addressed. But again, it's like Democrats aren't saying, like, their entire shtick, their entire image act is to be obstinate, to just oppose Trump for the sake of opposing Trump. That's it. They don't really believe in anything. That's why they didn't. I'm all for giving Dreamers citizenship. I have friends who are Dreamers, but Democrats don't want to. Trump offered them offered Dreamers citizenship to build a wall. Democrats said no way, and now they lost pretty much all of their political funding, political power, influence. I don't really know what the Democratic Party has anymore. They might not win the House, And Republicans will gain in the Senate, so let's continue.
New developments in the legal showdown over the Trump administration's deportation flights. The federal judge demanded more information from the DOJ on the deportation. Just got that document.
State sex trafficking. Tren de Aragua is a trafficking operation involving smuggling women into the United States, holding them in stash houses in Louisiana, Florida, New York City, took over an Aurora, Colorado apartment complex where they kidnapped and tortured victims. And by the way, many of you in the mainstream media said that didn't happen. It turned out that it did.
And for those who needed a civics lesson, some of whom are in the mainstream media, well, they got one from none other than White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, who had quite the exchange on CNN. Watch this.
So just to ask you a simple question, you talk about how the system works. Does a district court judge have the right to direct or enjoin troop movements overseas? Yes or no?
Well, Stephen, my question, if you could answer my question first,
in other words,
is Venezuela invading our country in a way that would apply this way?
So I'll answer yours and you'll answer mine. Under the terms of the statute, Tren de Aragua is an alien enemy force that has come here as detailed at length in the proclamation at the direction of the Venezuelan government. The statute says that a president has the ability to repel an invasion or predatory incursion that is directed by a foreign
state
government.
or a government, right? Are they a state or a government?
This would be,
Stephen Miller is saying within the proclamation that they were sent by the state, by the government there.
Yes, it is documented that TDA was sent by the Venezuelan government in the proclamation. And here's an even more important point. Under the Constitution, who makes that determination? A district court judge elected by no one, or the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy? The president and the president alone makes it.
And that's why the Supreme Court would side with Trump. Because he's enforcing existing laws, immigration laws, and he's citing the fact that criminal organization was sent by a country. So, and this is so Andrew Weissman's statement, well, we're not being invaded. If another country is sending, the equivalent of soldiers, that would be that term would apply.
Decision of what triggers that determination.
So do you then think we
statute.
are actually at war with Venezuela, the nation state of Venezuela?
You wouldn't have to be if the country itself was actually sending that organization into our country.
You're not hearing me and you're not understanding me.
So let me set the stage here, and I do have the newly filed DOJ memo right here in front of me. This timeline's important. So this is where we are. This all happened Saturday. And as you see, at about 5:22 p.m., the judge ordered this hearing to take place about these two plane loads of suspected criminals. Some of those on the plane suspected criminals, not all of them. 5:45 p.m., the plane takes off, the two planes. 6 p.m., the hearing resumes. Now, before 6:52 p.m., you have Boasberg issuing a ruling ordering the government to turn around any planes. Now, these two planes were already in the air. And the written order, as you can see, does not go out until 7:30, which is why you see Caroline Leavitt making the distinction between the verbal and the written order. Steve, I'm looking at the DOJ response right here, March 15th, 2025. After the proclamation was publicly posted and took effect, 3 planes, they now say, carrying aliens departed the U.S. for El Salvador. 2 of the planes departed before 7:25 p.m. That's before the written order. The 3rd plane departed after that time. The administration says to avoid any doubt, no one on any flight departing the U.S. after 7:25 p.m. was removed solely on the basis of the proclamation at issue. It's a tricky argument they're making because they're saying the judge has no authority to rule on this because of this act that we're leaning on. However, we still complied. And here are the facts.
Right. And the reason this whole lawsuit started was because the ACLU and another group was suing to make sure that 5 Venezuelans were not on any of those flights. And according to the government, they were not. But that's why today at noon, 5 minutes and 52 seconds ago, they had to comply and they had to say, okay, tell us about this and give us the summary of all this activity over the weekend. I am old enough to remember the old days when if there was a terrorist in the United States, we'd try to get him off our property as quickly as possible. Our federal government has designated that organization as a terrorist outfit. And so just imagine if they were members of Al-Qaeda or ISIS, we would want them disposed of as quickly as possible. What the president has done at the White House lawyers' brilliance, I suppose, they would say, is by signing that executive order on Friday night, essentially, as you were talking about, the Alien Enemies Act, you can deport non-citizens during war, invasion, or predatory incursions. And he's already said this was an invasion. Unfortunately for the Democrats, they now have to defend.
That's right.
They've got to defend, okay, this gang, this transnational gang of thugs accused of all these bad things. And the Democrats are defending them.
And take responsibility for what they fight for.
And I'm looking at the memo. It's 3 pages.
And the Democrats can't defend them because they'll continue to lose Congress, presidency. So they don't really believe in anything they claim to believe. They just want to oppose Trump. That's it. They just want to oppose Trump. That's the only thing they want to. That's like the lifeblood of the Democratic Party. Oppose Trump. Then defend Biden preemptively pardoning 20 to 30 people for crimes that we all knew happened. But the auto pen issue isn't as big as the preemptive pardon. The ex parte Garland case in the late 1860s, in 1867, and then the other case in 1869, did not give the president power to preemptively pardon people who were never accused of a crime. So, according to Democrats, Falsey and Cheney, these are pure as the driven snow. So there's not an acknowledgement by anyone other than like Trump and others, you know, RFK Jr. and Elon Musk, anyone with a functioning brain cell, that, yeah, of course, everyone from Hunter to, Cheney, Schiff, a bunch of the people on the committee likely committed crimes. But the Supreme Court precedents were for people who had acknowledged in some way, shape, or form that they committed a crime. Not so. Hunter is probably the only person that actually will be protected by the pardon because he was convicted of certain crimes, not the likely graft and bribery linked to Biden, Joe. But the other ones, it's like Biden preemptively pardoned a bunch of people who have never even been investigated. So according to the Associated Press, they even admit that that's never happened before. Oh my God. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've been talking and it was muted the whole time. Fine. Trump can decide what he wants in terms of foreign policy, negotiate these types of negotiations. It's in the Constitution with Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, and a district judge or a federal judge can't stop that. Anyway, hit subscribe. I'll be back tonight at around 10:30 or so. To my super chat, thank you.